Oh, it's coming up.
That's me and Kathy. That screen is
purpose confirms, it is clear to you.
Yeah, no,
That's one of my favorites. Yeah, I was never that young.
Okay.
Wigs were very in fashion then.
Isn't it amazing how much they look alike?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I remember that picture.
Sorry, but who is this guy?
Are you serious?
He's laughing.
The skinny one?
Yeah. He's got hair at least.
Tell him that.
Man, you got hair where you go. Yeah, it's like, that's why I'm coming over. I don't want to come to the top.
Just makes you taller.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah. We're set. Good afternoon, family, friends, and loved ones. As a reminder, please silence your phones for the duration of this memorial. We have gathered together to celebrate the life of Jeanne Antoinette Esper Brown, to attest to the impact that she had on all of our lives, and to remind ourselves of the connection we feel with one another. These connections between Dr. Brown's family and friends are, after all, one of her greatest legacies. So on behalf of Jeanne's family, I give all of you thanks for being here today to celebrate such an extraordinary life. And for those of you participating via streaming, your presence here is felt, even if you are unable to be in this physical space with us. We look forward to the time when we can all be together again. We'll begin our memorial today with a brief video presentation put together by David Brown.
Hello, I'm Jeanne Esper Brown. I love you very much.
It was the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, and hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there.
And now, something that has been promised for a good number of years, D&C folks, a silver tray. I bet it
Family Olympics. Yes, right on our face out.
If I can.
Judge, should we be worried Anna just got taken away?
East Lansing Heritage Support Group. I wish to thank the council.
Happy birthday, dear Mom. Happy birthday to you. Wish.
You don't really want me blowing over it, do you?
Sweet your magic hands.
Oh, David, thank you for assembling that. We see so much of Jeanne's sense of humor and zest for life throughout the years represented in that video. There we go. Thank you. I first met Jeanne 6 years ago while dating her granddaughter, Kate Simon, who is now my lovely wife. When I first met Jeanne, she introduced herself to me as Dr. Jeanne Brown. I'm sure most of you know how important that accomplishment was to her. And she was right to be proud of it. She earned her doctorate, her master's degree first in the 1970s, and her doctorate in 1982, at a time when fewer women were admitted into graduate-level education. Women who did receive graduate degrees had to not only be extremely smart, but work extra hard and have an incredible amount of tenaciousness. Now, if we were to take a survey of everyone here about one of Jeanne's most notable characteristics, I bet tenacity would be close to the top. When she set her sights accomplishing something, she wasn't going to let go. She took that determination and marshaled it into a master's degree and a PhD from Michigan State University, where she spent her career as a professor in family and child development and higher education. As you probably know, her work and reputation as a professor allowed her to travel throughout Michigan and overseas as a distinguished educator and one of the renowned voices of her profession, receiving national honors. In 1973, Jeanne was awarded the Superior Service Award, one of the USDA's top honors in Washington, D.C. She was cited for exemplary educational leadership and unrelenting efforts in conducting child development programs, which have expanded opportunities for youth, improved family stability, and created new horizons for human potential in Michigan. Unrelenting effort sounds a lot like tenacity. I think we have is it the program from that ceremony that is represented over there? And of course, her professional life was far from the only thing that was important to Jeanne. Her children and marriage to Frank and their mutual love of hamburgers with mustard endured for 58 years. It takes tenacity and patience to nurture a marriage for nearly 6 decades through thick and thin. This was certainly put to the test in the late 1990s when they found out Frank had Parkinson's disease. It's one of those curveballs that life throws at you sometimes. It didn't undo them. Instead, they both became active in the Michigan Parkinson's Foundation, and Jeanne spearheaded the Lansing Parkinson's Caregivers Support Group. Both Jeanne and Frank developed long-lasting friendships for years to come. Jeanne continued to take part in monthly lunches with her Parkinson's Caregivers Support Group, aka the Lunch Bunch. I think a few of the Lunch Bunches here today, until just a few years ago. One of Jeanne's favorite things to do with family and friends was planning trips and traveling. The list of places she visited in her life is not short. Each summer with her young family, Jeanne and Frank packed up the car and headed on a road trip to different parts of Michigan, maybe Ohio to visit grandparents, maybe across country. Years later, after the kids were launched, the trips branched out to Europe, Panama, Alaska, and more. I hear most of these excursions transpired through Jeanne announcing where she was planning on going and asking Frank if he'd like to come along. Does that sound about right? Yeah. For Jeanne, these travels were a rich learning experience to discover other parts of the world, history, people, food, and culture. But as much as she liked to travel, she also loved being at home in Michigan, because that's where her children were. Many of their children and friends that she considered part of the family. The Jeanne her children knew growing up loved children, plants, animals, nature, science, learning, teaching, reading a good book, and helping people when they needed it. most of all, she loved being in the midst of the people she loved. Even in the photograph montage that we saw before the ceremony this afternoon, we could see how many of those pictures involved Jeanne in the midst of a big group of people celebrating. There was little she loved more than these big family gatherings with friends. So she would have felt right at home in this gathering today, with the people closest to her all coming together and celebrating her life. It's hard to imagine a better legacy you can leave for the world than all of us gathered here today, united in our sorrow at Jeanne's passing, but also gratitude for the time we were able to spend with her, and with all of the deep connections we have with one another. I know many of you have stories and memories of your time with Jeanne. If you'd like to share one or two of those, there will be time. First, I would like to invite Jeanne's brother, Tom Esper, to speak.
Good afternoon. I guess all of you have heard about Jeanne and all the things that she has done, a significant amount of things that was done on her professional life, and those were certainly all demanding jobs in many cases, and all took a lot of work to make it happen. But I thought that I might give you just a little bit of a different perspective and kind of take it from when I was real little and let you know about some of the things that occurred through the years. Jeanne, one of the things that you notice in the bulletin, it does say that her name is Jeanne Antoinette Esper Brown. She, like many people, was not only proud of her name, Jeanne, but she usually wanted people to know that her middle name was Antoinette. That was one of the things that impressed me through the years growing up. When you think back and you think of when Jeanne was born and the events that were occurring throughout the world as she was a youngster, of course, she grew up during the 1930s and the recession years. And life, even though the family was fortunate enough to stay employed, my dad worked with the university at the time. He had graduated in horticulture, and so a lot of the plantings throughout the university were his doings and still exist to this day. So in any case, the stories that I got in later years from Jeanne about growing up they lived on West 7th Avenue in Columbus, which was very close to the campus. Things, because of the Depression, were amazingly different than what you and I experience nowadays. They had beggars knocking at their door regularly. They still had, in those days, amazingly enough, to this day, I'm surprised, there were Indians that still lived in the Columbus area. And they would come knocking and wanting handouts. So think how different lives were back then. Of course, World War II came along, and things became tight, and you had rationing of food, and some things were much more difficult to obtain, and you had these little coupons that you had to take to the grocery with you in order to buy things. So that certainly was an experience that we have not encountered since then, and I hope that we never do. But as the war was winding down, and probably around, I would guess, probably 1945 period, she and her friends, they liked to, all of them wanted to become adults and do things that teenagers can't do and things like that. So during that period, her friends had decided that her nickname was going to be Frankie. So that was something that a lot of people don't know about, I guess, but she had lots of friends, high school friends, and they had lots of fun having dinners and stuff at our house up there on Andover Road. And one of the New Year's times, I was still pretty little at the time, they decided they would have a New Year's party. And of course they got, your cartoons and all that, they got to show the baby New Year coming in. So she, and I never thought too much good of it, let's say, but she made me wear a diaper and that, and I was to come down the stairs at the appropriate time and be the New Year's coming in. So she was inventive, I would say, in some of the things that she did. But also, as they got out of high school, several of her friends decided they wanted to branch out and go someplace different and spend a summer, kind of an interim in between high school life and beginning college life. So they took a job, being the three of them, took a job at a resort in northwestern New York State. It's called Chautauqua. Maybe some of you have heard of that place before. So they were waitresses and they did other things there, taking care of the customers at Chautauqua. So they had a lot of fun learning, meeting new people, and there were other young people working there too, so I'm sure they all had a really good summer of it. The college life came along, and the next big thing that I remember about her was that in her studies, one of the things that she had to take was chemistry. And because of the field she was going into, it was not just one, back then I think it was quarters they called it, of chemistry, but she was in 2 or 3 quarters of it altogether and getting into even more advanced chemistry. But at the same time, I had, right from the get-go, a big interest in learning how to build things and how to do things like chemical experiences and all that, and was very interested in that in high school even, but I was still fairly young, obviously. So she asked me one day, she said, "Do you think you might like to go with me to a class?" And I said, "Sure." So she checked with the instructors and they said, yes, that would be fine. So for that whole quarter, I went with her to her chemistry classes, and I learned a heck of a lot. So when I took chemistry in high school, boy, that was quick, no problem. So she was really great at wanting myself and my sister Patty, or a lot of times she said, no, it's Patricia. But anyhow, I could really irritate her, by the way, if I called her Patsy. So anyhow, I had a big interest in chemistry and physics, and she saw to it that I was able to pursue those things. All through the years, of course, Jeanne became a big, big help with my mother in taking care of myself and Patty. She became, being the 8-year difference in our ages, she became the stated babysitter when Mom and Dad would want to go out. And sometimes that probably rubbed her the wrong way, getting stuck at home being a babysitter, but she did it, and she enjoyed it and took care of us very, very well. I'm not sure, but I believe that Jeanne met Frank at OSU. Is that correct? Do you know? Lynn?
I think it was through church.
Through church, yeah. Jeanne and Frank were both very involved with education, even back at church days at the Methodist Church. It was at Fifth Avenue along one of the major roads there in Columbus. So they did a lot of teaching of Sunday school classes and things like that. So she definitely had the interest in education from a very early age too. And they eventually, of course, got married, and eventually they decided that they needed to have a home. So they bought a piece of property up at the north edge of what was Upper Arlington, but at that time it was right at the edge of where all the farm fields began. And because of my interest, I helped them build the house up there. And they worked hard on that together, and I helped as I could. And then it was not too many years along the way there that when I was going to OSU, that the draft was in process and Vietnam was warming up. So the draft was pulling a lot of people's numbers and telling you're part of the army military now. But in high school, I had joined the Navy Reserve. So I did not want to go into the Army. So I went ahead and in my second year of college, I went ahead and volunteered for active duty in the Navy. And I thought I'd probably be only on active duty for about maybe 3 years, but I liked what I was doing. I was very involved with electronics and aviation. So while I was at OSU, I got my pilot license and eventually became an instructor, and still doing that to this day. And so Jeanne at one point said, well, why don't you come up to Michigan and Lansing, fly up here and visit? Well, it sounded like a good excuse to go flying. So I did. I came up and flew into the local airport, and we had a nice visit for several days, and of course eventually went back. But she always thought that was great for Tom to fly in and let her get in the airplane. And I think she took a short ride even. So, her interest in everything was really great. And she was a great educator to myself and Patty. She worked hard at OSU. I remember her getting her master's degree, and because I was on active duty and being transferred all over the place, I didn't get to visit nearly as much as I might have normally through the years. And so I won't say that we drifted apart, but it was just a different relationship of me gradually getting convinced by a young girl in architectural drafting that we should start going together, and we eventually became married and started our own family. So it was only in more recent years that once again we were able to communicate with each other a bit more than we had for a number of years. And so we had, my parents were really great at wanting to have family reunions. And as special events came along, like 50-year reunion and 60-year reunion, they saw to it that as much of the family could get together as possible. And we did that several times down at Hocking Hills. And if you're familiar with Hocking Hills at all, they've got the camping area, but they also have an area where they've got cabins. And some of them are built in a cul-de-sac arrangement. So my dad rented all of the 5 cabins in that area of the cul-de-sac, and even a couple that were just outside of the cul-de-sac, and we had the whole family together both times, and that was a great thing, really great. And of course, we like to listen to Jeanne's and Frank's stories of the years and how they looked at things and how they looked at us growing up. So it all was a super experience for us as young people growing up with Jeanne's looking over our shoulder and helping Mom and Dad a lot and seeing to it that we became good adults. So it's with a lot of regret that I perhaps didn't visit quite as much as I should have and would have. But I did run across a couple of poems that had been written by an individual. The name's right here, I believe. Well, I had it. Anyhow, they're worth reading to you. And so I'm going to do that. This is entitled, Her Journey's Just Begun. Don't think of her as gone away. Her journey has just begun. Life holds many facets. The earth is only one. Just think of her as resting from the sorrows and the tears in a place of warmth and comfort where there are no days and years. Think how she must be wishing that we could know today how nothing but our sadness can really pass away. And think of her as living in the hearts of those she touched, for nothing ever loved is ever lost. And she was loved so much. The same author put a little different take on it. It's called, What is a Sister? A sister is a gift received from God. You know how each other feels with just a smile or a nod. A sister is a friend, one that you did not choose. She'll tell you like it is, but never wants to see you lose. At times, she makes you laugh. At times, she makes you cry. She'll ask you the tough questions and is not happy until she knows why. We may not always see eye to eye, but that's what siblings do. I just can't imagine growing up without you. Precious, kind, good-hearted, sincere, just barely describes your worth, Jeanne. You can never be replaced by anything on this earth. So there you have it. It's a great story. It's perhaps a little long story, but we all enjoyed every minute of it. So I thank you for allowing me time to give my thoughts about Jeanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. On behalf of Patty Wolf, Jeanne's sister, I invite Lauren Brown Pierce to read a piece that Patty has written for this occasion.
All right. Memories of Jeanne Antoinette Esper Brown by Patricia Esper Wolf. We are so sad we cannot be physically present with you today in remembrance and celebration of your dear mother, grandmother, aunt, friend, my sister, Jeanne Antoinette Esper Brown. These difficult times underscore the importance of family and friends and what a refuge we have in leaning on each other. We take comfort in the sweet memories we've experienced together. Thank you for letting me share some of the poignant and funny memories I have of Jeanne. Jeanne was the firstborn to Harold Carl and Esther Rose Esper. Our mother shared how jubilant the extended German clan was to have the first grandchild, but even more delighted to have a granddaughter. All were thrilled and adored and doted on Jeanne until that fateful day, 8 years later, when my brother Tom was born. And 2 years after Tom, I arrived on the scene. The two of us really ruined a good thing. That spotlight that had been center stage was now being cast stage left, stage right. These two pests really messed up her lovely world. My first recollection of Jeanne is not the most pleasant. You ask how I can share something unpleasant? You be the judge. It was New Year's Eve. This story sounds a little familiar. It was New Year's Eve, 1944. Jeanne planned a high school New Year's Eve bash at the Esper home. She persuaded my mother that a New Year's Eve baby was required to help ring in the new year at the stroke of midnight, and I was that baby. Can you imagine being 6 years old and having to come into a room full of teenagers and parents dressed in a top hat, sash, and you guessed it, a baby diaper? At the stroke of midnight, the clock chimed, the crowd laughed, and I ran to my room in tears. It was time for some payback. Not too long after the baby incident, Jeanne was preparing for the Upper Arlington High School prom. I watched excitedly as she prepared for the evening. Perfectly done hair, sweet-smelling perfume, and a new perfectly fitted dress. As the time drew near for her expected date to arrive, I was in stealth mode, peering through the banisters at the top of the stairs. I was so excited to see what her date looked like and take in all the sights. The doorbell rang. Jeanne opened the door to a nice-looking young man. They were alone in the entry hall, or so they thought. As I watched excitedly, her date presented her with a lovely corsage, gently helped her pin it to her dress, and to my surprise, he leaned over and kissed Jeanne on the cheek. I immediately jumped up to sound the alarm. My parents in the neighborhood needed to know that a boy had kissed my sister. My parents I ran all through the house exclaiming, "Mom and Dad, he kissed her, he kissed her, he kissed her." They were both quite embarrassed, and I had gotten her back. Looking back, I realize how hard it must have been for Jeanne. Being 10 years her junior, I was always the little pest, following her around, constantly asking questions, getting into her things, and generally prattling on and on. I remember a time that Dad was going to attend a banking convention in San Francisco. In that Jeanne was close to graduating from college and would soon be leaving the nest, our parents decided that we should experience that cross-country journey adventure as a family, seeing sights and making memories. 6 weeks of togetherness. Jeanne and Frank had been dating and were deeply in love. A cross-country road trip was the last thing that Jeanne wanted. I remember every stop for gas, point of interest, or national monument, Jeanne would disappear. We always found her at a phone talking to Frank. Shortly after this family adventure, Jeanne and Frank were married and joined their lives together. Our lives separated and took very different paths, with Jeanne and Frank moving to Fort Recovery, Ohio, and eventually to Michigan, and my husband Fred and I to Texas. I wish we would have had more time and gotten to know each other as adults. I always looked forward to our times together, laughing and making memories. One very special time is the last time I saw Jeanne in June of 2018. Her sweet daughter Lynn and son David drove Jeanne more than 1,100 miles from Williamston, Michigan to Dallas, Texas, so we could be together. It was wonderful to reunite and recount special times. The things I will remember and always cherish about my sister is how successful she was in her career endeavors, how kind and thoughtful she and Frank were to our mother and dad in their later years, and what a loving and attentive mother she was to Kathy, David, and Lynn. We will all miss her greatly, but we are thankful for her life and the impact on each of us.
Thank you, Lauren. And thank you, Patricia, for those memories. Next, I would like to invite Susan to read on behalf of Hilda Esper Anesco.
Hello. I've been asked to read this tribute to Jeanne Esper Brown from her cousin, Hildegard. The year 2002 was a landmark year for me. It was when I rediscovered my family, my heritage, my ancestors, and it was all due to my first cousin, Jeanne Esper Brown. Sadly, my mother and father, living in faraway Seattle, had let family ties slip. They had exchanged letters for many years, but by the 1990s, I no longer knew the addresses or married names of my cousins. Enter the internet. I discovered Jeanne and Patty and Tom. I began a warm, close relationship with Jeanne. This led to a wonderful trip of discovery and reunion in the summer of 2002. My husband, Mauricio, and I flew to Columbus, Ohio to meet Jeanne and Frank Brown. We shared a motel suite. They took us to see the house in Germantown, where my father and my uncles were born, the bigger house on High Street where they grew up. We saw the school where Aunt Mary taught, South High where my parents met, the house where my mother lived. Here was my heritage. What a wonderful gift from Jeanne. Jeanne and I worked closely to help write the family history book, gathering data from earlier generations. Lynn designed and edited it into a beautiful book. I remember the wonderful family reunions we had at Deer Creek, at the Hocking Hills, in Michigan, and in Dallas. I had never had a family before. I had been alone in the world. It was Jeanne who gave me back my family, the greatest of all gifts.
Thank you, Susan. And Hildegard, thank you for that touching tribute. Next, I invite remarks from some of Jeanne's children and grandchildren, starting with David Brown.
Very difficult acts to follow. I'll do my best and keep it fairly short. But it wouldn't be a Dave Brown story without a little AV presentation. So I have a very short video, audio clip to play, hopefully. And it leads into my story, I hope. And if not, we'll just go without it. Well, it'll probably start playing when I least expect it. Family was always so important to Mom, to Dad, and the family was both the nuclear family, as she would teach at the university, and the extended family, as you heard from Hilda and Mircea, and being adopted back into the family. That was so wonderful, and the family has grown. And it's so good to see many people here that have been part of that inclusive family. I remember many years ago that my parents used to send me to summer camp, Mystic Lake, for 2 weeks. And I don't know if that was for my benefit or for their benefit. Probably good to get away for 2 years. And Lynn was cleaning out the house recently and came across a scrap of paper in the bottom of a sleeping bag in the basement of Jeanne's house. And I had totally forgotten about that. And it was a wonderful little piece of memory. It was a postcard, a 4-cent postcard from the 60s. It never got sent. I wrote it and stuffed it in there while I was at camp because I was very, very upset. The postcard reads, "Dear Mom and Dad, I think I'm getting a little homesick. I start crying when I think of you and hope everything is okay. P.S. I'm having a fine time. Hope you are too. Love, David." So thank you, Lynn, for finding that little bit of my past. This goes in my archive, in my scrapbook now. What I was trying to play was that old Alan Sherman bit, hello Mata, hello Fada, Camp Granada. I'm sorry we couldn't, but some other time maybe. But thank you all for being here. Thanks for the support you're giving our family, and thank you to my sister Lynn for doing an awful lot of work for today's event and ceremony. And go green.
Thank you, David. Lynn?
I second that. Yay for last night's game win. Mom would have loved it. She wouldn't have actually wanted to watch. She would have done, oh, I can't watch. And then she'd always, oh my, I just can't watch. Anyway, she loved MSU games, and she wouldn't want to have missed an overtime win like that for anything. Mom, I made some notes for today, and my notes were really just kind of little chicken scratches to, I want to talk about that, and it ended up being way, way too long. But I do want to share a few things. Mom was someone who loved children. She loved her grandchildren. She loved her children. She loved the neighborhood children. Kids were just fascinating to her. She loved plants, animals, nature, science, learning, and laughing. She enjoyed a good laugh. And when something was in need or someone was in need, she would open her arms and help them out as well. As a young child, I remember having the freedom to learn and explore life in many creative ways, and was very much encouraged to do so. Even from when I was only 3 years old and learned how to ride a two-wheel bike all by myself. And Mom saying she would look out the window and say, Frank, Lynn's riding a bike. You have to go help her. And that's the way I started getting a lot of skinned knees, but that was a part of learning. And Grandma or Mom was always encouraging of learning. And it wasn't always, you didn't have to give people an answer. You could let them learn through their own learning. And that was something I really appreciated from her. She was also good at nursing, and with me, she needed to do a lot of nursing because I was the daredevil. For example, I remember being able to run around barefoot and without a shirt on until I was about 6 years old. And I'd come home and I'd have blackened feet from running around in the grass and dirt all day long, and I'd have braids. I had long hair and braids, and she would say, well, Princess Blackfoot, it is time for your bath. But I would be so worn out at the end of the day that my legs would be all knotted up because I'd played so hard. And if I had one of those days after my bath and got settled into bed, she would rub my arms or rub my legs, and if need be, sing me a song. So that would help me go to sleep. So very nurturing, very caring that way. Another time that I can share the nurturing was when I was about 5 years old, and Dave, you might remember this because it was kind of a shock, especially to our father. We were all dressed up, ready to go to church, piled into the big station wagon, but Mom got to stay home because she got 2 or 3 hours all by herself to not have the kids running around. I think I was 5, and I had my cute little dress on, white tights, and I was in the back seat of the car, and Dad started pulling out of the driveway in that big old station wagon, and the door popped open. And I went falling out of the station wagon. Well, my pretty white tights now had blood on the knee, and probably scared the bejeebers out of my dad. But I got to go in the house, and I got to get my knee patched up, and I got to have Grandma's Afghan over top of me and a cup of tea and stay alone with my mom. And that was very special to me. Another time that was very memorable was back in, I think, 1964. We took a road trip out west, probably 3 weeks, and I was 7 years old, Dave was 10, Kathy was 13, and it was miserable being in the middle of the back seat with my older brother and sister tormenting me. It was, yes, just like that. And so Mom took pity on me, and she let me come sit in the front seat. She slid over next to Dad and I got to sit in the front seat and we played tic-tac-toe over and over and over again until I figured out how to make a cat game and do the tie every time. And so I think that took several hundred miles before I figured that out. But it was, she didn't tell me how to do it. It was all a part of learning. Okay, well, honey, what do you see? What happened on that one? Okay, what's your observation? Perfect mom. Mom also encouraged children to love nature. I could bring home tadpoles in a jar and put them in an aquarium and watch them morph into little toads. As a family, we'd take walks in the woods, trips to museums, arboretums, planetariums, baby animal days at MSU. I was taught the world was an interesting place, just waiting to explore. The love of animals especially was important to my sister Kathy. Kathy always had a love for animals, including, baby rabbits that were injured or robins. She brought home a baby robin once and nursed it to adulthood. And before releasing it back in the wild, made sure it was healthy, and the whole family went to Rose Lake Nature Center and released it together. And again, as a young adult in college, Kathy found a baby opossum. And that baby opossum was about the size of a mouse when it was found. And she tube fed it, raised it to adulthood, and it grew into a full-grown tame animal that was called, Joe, do you remember the name?
No, I don't.
Piglet. Piglet. And Piglet loved to be hand-fed grapes. And Piglet would grab a grape in its little prehensile thumb-opposed hand and slurp that grape. And the fun thing about Piglet is, Kathy and Joe were married and Piglet was still with them. And Piglet was actually donated to the Detroit Zoo. And the Detroit Zoo then in turn had a sister zoo in Berlin, and Piglet ended up in Berlin at the Berlin Zoo. So that's quite a famous opossum. We had pets as children. We had Beagle, Sparky, miniature beagle, cat named T.S. Eliot, who loved to ride on your shoulders. We had turtles, fish, land crabs, guinea pigs, and she also let me raise mice as a breeding and genetics experiment in junior high. That's a special parent. Yeah. At the end of Mom's life, it became obvious in the last 4 to 6 months of her life that she was getting ready for the end of her life. She started talking more about her mom and dad and that they were coming for a visit. And she started talking more about Frank. He was at the door. And she was sharing stories about having been to the moon. And she shared with Todd from Crosshairs, where she was staying in assisted living. And she shared with family that she had really been to the moon. And she looked at me and said, "No, really?" Now, others might think that's crazy talk. But knowing Jeanne, you might be surprised if it might not really be true. She reached for the stars, and I believe she found them in all their magnificent glory.
Thank you, Lynn. Jean's granddaughter, Anna Simon.
Hi. Can everyone hear me? I'm not used to talking without a mask anymore, so. A couple of things strike me in listening to these stories from the past, and one is that Ralph Nader really did a lot for seatbelt regulations. And the other is how much commonalities there are in each of these stories, and in some ways that I don't think I maybe even realized before right now. So I didn't know you were going to call me. I thought we got to volunteer ourselves. It was kind of sneaky. I would have waited till I was a little more composed. So I'm going to just share some memories of my own, of Grandma Brown, or Jeanne, or Mom, or sister, as many of you might know her. I actually always remember Grandma wearing a uniform, this kind of white blousey shirt, and navy trousers, although I saw more pictures of white pants today, but I remember them being navy. And I remember she had this pink lipstick that she would wear. I used to see her a lot when I was little. We went over to her house a lot. And in later years, she would have a cardigan sweater on. She was always cold. There were pockets in that sweater. And we were remembering earlier today, she always had Kleenex in those pockets. Or, I guess, stuffed in the sleeves.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. And as a mom now, I know how important that is to have Kleenex stuffed everywhere. I remember how much she loved to travel, which I think has continued on in all of her grandchildren. Her trips to Japan, I remember she used to talk about English castles, which as a small child seemed like the most amazing thing ever. I remember listening to stories of her taking her own children to these castles and letting them run around. It seemed like the best thing ever. I remember her elder hostel trips. But the affinity with England, she had this unexplained to me affinity with England, and it just seemed to align her with the Queen somehow in my memory. So, like, Grandma was a distant relative who retained the distinction of good breeding. That was always how I thought of her. So I describe Grandma now to other people as our family's matriarch. So not perhaps unlike our own version of a queen. Grandma, I remember, kept everything in order. She was exacting in her requirements and at times exasperated, when something or someone didn't comport to her expectations. Several times during my life, Grandma was called in for an intervention. Once to help me clean my room, which had become so piled high with stuff, I think my mother couldn't deal with it. So she brought in the big guns, which was Grandma, and she brought in a black plastic garbage bag and started throwing things away, to my horror, and my room got clean. Another time, as an anxious teenager abroad with severe homesickness, I also went to Camp Mystic Lake once and left from homesickness, and an inability to self-soothe so far from home. She was brought in, she wrote me and called me and did her best to supply the intangibles I required so far from home. A red book of grammatical rules and composition was gifted to me when I left for college. A token befitting me as a novice writer and scholar, but perhaps more revealing about the giver, a late life PhD who knew the rules but did not always follow them. Before my grandfather became noticeably sick, I remember so much love in that house, their front door opening, which we saw a clip of that, to my sister and I's visits. There was always so much fanfare, like we hadn't seen them in so long, even though they just lived 20 minutes away. And their hugs and kisses and those astonished, exaggerated remarks of how much we've grown and how they're gonna put bricks on our heads to keep us from growing further. We just felt like little celebrities when we came over. Grandma and Grandpa also had cable TV, where in addition to Nickelodeon, I was able to watch the brand new network, MTV, which I used to watch quietly, privately, because it felt vaguely dirty. It was MTV. For those of you that don't know, that's a music television station from the late 80s. I used to watch that in one of their bedrooms, and I studied the dance moves and the music videos. And even then, I was really keenly interested in narrative and narrative structure of music videos. I really was. I was like, those lyrics don't match the song or those dance moves that they're showing. So this happened in their house on Buena Parkway in Hazlitt, which was the only house I had ever known them in. And I remember it perfectly. When I recently bought a house a few years ago, my first house in Madison, it reminded me of their house so much. It was a house from 1960, and the layout is very similar to theirs. And I could close my eyes right now and draw you that house. There were so many joyous family holidays spent there, and Grandma always was presiding. I remember playing Frisbee outside that house in the summertime on the sleepy neighborhood streets, and I remember gathering around her large table. There was always a kids' table set up because we always had bonus family members attending, because Grandma and Grandpa always brought home extra people to celebrate with us. And I remember so many jokes being made. Things used to get pretty silly over that table. And my grandmother fully participated in this. She was able to launch a good zinger with the best of them. When my daughter Clementine was born just a few weeks, over 7 years ago, she became the firstborn daughter of a firstborn, of a firstborn, of a firstborn. I don't know what happens after that. So I trace it back to Jeanne. I didn't pass on Jeanne's name to my daughter, which my mother and I share. It's our middle name. My name is Anna Jean, and my mother's name is Kathy Jean. But I kept the J. I did use the J for my daughter. So my daughter is very strong-willed and loving, and creative. She's very forthright. She's extremely disappointed that she could not be here today. She started to cry when I told her that I was going on my own. I was taking an airplane without her. She wanted to see Grandma Brown, and I said, no, there's not. She's not really going to be there. And then she said that she wanted to see Grandma's, what was the word? Her afterlife ghost. She thought that Grandma's afterlife ghost would be here. Anyway, I said no. Although maybe, actually, if she can go to the moon, she can certainly join us today. So if you tell my daughter no, she figures out a way to get what she wants. And she's been doing this from a very early age. She can be downright demanding and a bit cranky, but she's very strong, and we know she's going to do well. I sense Grandma in her often. And it's Jeanne's influence on her daughter, my mother, and her granddaughter, me, that is manifesting now in her great-granddaughter. And it occurs to me that this is the way generations continue and how we almost imperceptibly but undeniably carry on in one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Are there others present who would like to offer a short memory, tribute, or other words? Please.
I'm Joanne Holtz, and my husband and I live in the house that the Brown children grew up in. We're very blessed to be able to hear the memories that you have. It makes the house more alive for us. We've known the Brown family for probably 60, 65 years, since at least the children were in junior high, because I don't think you went to the same grade school. But Jeanne left us a gift that will live on for many generations. And when you spoke of her love of gardening and how her dad was a horticulturalist, we know where she got her talents for the gardens that are around the house today. And she made sure, I'm sure, when she was planning all this, that she must have studied manuals and garden catalogs to see when things bloomed. Because we moved in February, and there were already little yellow aconites, I think they were called, growing and blooming under the snow. And when they were gone, there were some little blue flowers, which have spread. Want some blue flowers? And when they were gone, the violets and the snowdrops, there was a succession of flowers all year long. When they were gone, the hostas came up, and the lilies. And this summer, the whole front yard was full of maybe 10 different varieties of lilies. And when they died out, the hostas started blooming. So I admire her tenacity and her perseverance in looking up at all these things to make sure that there was always something in bloom. And right now, there is a fall clematis that's probably this wide and over the fence and back down the other side. And it's in full bloom and it smells so good. And I think Jeanne must have really loved that plant because I think she wanted to make sure that we didn't do anything wrong with it that first year we moved in. How's my clematis? She Norma lived across the street until she died a couple of years ago. And she and Jean, and maybe probably the husbands too, but Norma told us they would take their carts and their wagons and their wheelbarrows and get soil from the marsh and the swamp to enrich the clay that was in that subdivision at the time that they moved in. And there is some beautiful soil there now. And I made friends with Jeanne more personally through her plants than I did as I knew her as a person. We were close when they were alive. But through all your testimony and your memories, you have enriched our lives. And I think maybe I can speak for the rest of the neighbors who are here that she will live on in our memories very fondly. And you know that we send our condolences and our love to you for including us today. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that imagery of there being always something in bloom. Are there others who would wish to share a short memory?
My memories of Jeanne would be more professional than personal as family. I was her last graduate assistant. When she retired, I had been helping her for several years. I had started working with her, and she was had not been teaching for very long, so she was, freshly out of her PhD, I think. And she taught a class that was called The Individual, Marriage, and the Family. And it was a largish class. We taught in the Union, which is right next to the building where the College of Human Ecology was. And we would have 150 students, and it would be full every semester because people loved the class and they loved Jeanne. And I started helping her with the class. I had gone back to school to get 15 credits to get recertified because when we moved to Michigan, I let my teaching certification lapse, and I had started substitute teaching, and I said, I want to go back to teaching, so I have to get recertified. And once I started helping her, it was like, this is what I want to teach, this class, okay? So I continued then through my master's degree, and I started on a PhD. And by that time, she had retired, somebody else had taught the class, and then I was asked to teach it, and I thought, if I can teach this class without continuing with the PhD and all the garbage that goes with it, I will. And I taught it for 17 years. And I have to tell you, the second semester I helped her, the first semester I helped her, I took notes like the kids did, took notes like crazy, so that I would understand the course and so on and so forth. In the second semester, the first day of class, about a half an hour before I was leaving home to come to campus, she called me. And she said, I am in the emergency room. I have a detached retina. I will not be there today. You're on your own. Which I just about had the big one, let me tell you. She said, you can pick up the syllabi at the print shop, because we had a print shop in the top floor of the Human Ecology building, and take it with you and you'll do fine. And she said, I will leave. I have left my file for the first course in my mailbox. And so she gave me directions to her house. I pulled up to the mailbox. I pulled this manila folder out of the mailbox, opened it up, and in it was a newspaper article and a 3x5 card with 6 words written on it. And I was so glad that I had taken notes the first semester that I helped her, because that's what I taught from. And she was out for 6 weeks. And so I was on my own for 6 weeks, and she would call me and she said, how are things going, and so on and so forth. But she was so supportive, and it really solidified my desire to be like Jeanne, to do that. And she was just such a great support. And by the time she retired and I finished helping her, she had me writing exams and just doing everything that I would need to do to be able to do the class myself. And so she taught me how to teach college level classes, and I have her to thank for that because I loved it. I loved it. I taught the class for 17 years until I retired. So it was just a great experience knowing her professionally, which I haven't heard a lot of yet today. So I wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you all for your words. I'm sorry. Do we have another person wanting to share? Yeah. Oh, Todd. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name's Todd Walter, and I own Crosairs, where Jeanne lived for almost 5 years. Next Sunday, we're having our own memorial over on our property, in which we were going to be planting a crabapple tree in Jeanne's memory. And we thought that was very appropriate, right, for many good ways. And we hope it's going to be a beautiful day. We're going to share a lot of wonderful things and memories. Staff, families, and elders who live there will be out at that time. But when somebody lives with you for almost 5 years, we've been open to be 10 years next April. Jeanne was our longest elder to live at Crosairs. I remember the first day I met her when Dave and Lynn brought their mother. And I could talk for a long time about Jeanne. I'm going to save some of the wonderful stories next Sunday. But everything I heard today, it really mimicked in the last 5 years of how I got to know Jeanne. She was a very staunch, tough woman, very independent. She was right. She was always right. She did get to the moon, and we helped her get to the moon. We didn't change that opinion. We asked her how it was. Can you describe it? It was fascinating. Jeanne was a fascinating soul. She always wanted to make sure her hair looked good. I was scared to death to pick it after I took her to the beauty shop. When Jeanne first moved in, she had a beautician who lived over in Hazlitt, and I drove Jeanne to that weekly. We had great conversations. She was remarkable that until you got to know her, I describe it as when you could break that shell, that tough shell that was there, that educator, that independent woman, strong woman. But when you broke that barrier down and really got to know her, she was tons of fun. Loved your stories. Loved your story. We had so much fun. She liked to be, we could never hardly get Jeanne on any field trip, which was fine. It's all about choice. But when we went to MSU, she'd go, right? She never really wanted to participate much of things in the home, maybe. But when kids were there, she did come alive. And you could see that education component come out because she would take that small child and try to walk them through all those steps. So again, her whole life of the stories you've shared, lovely meeting you, sir, her brother. I do remember that story about you flying in. Jeanne did share that early. 5 years again, when you go back in your memory of so many stories, I forgot that one until you brought that forward. And her sister, who was unable to be here from Texas, I remember working with you to get your mother in that car for that trip in her late 80s and thinking, wow, man, when they took off in the driver, we're like, whoa, good luck, right? What? She was 90, right? And she was hesitant. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to go, should go. And we really worked hard as a unit for her to make that journey that we knew was probably going to be that last time. And when she came home, it was remarkable. So it's really neat, lovely, to be part of those 5 years. And Donna, one of our team members, Christine, is here today. It's lovely when people entrust upon you to care for their loved one. And 5 years is a long time. A long time where day in and day out, you walk side by side with that person. And we were blessed. I was up north when Jeanne passed, but staff were with her, family were. In her last breath, we're all going to leave this earth. And I always say at Crosairs, if we've done our job right if folks end well. And I think in Jeanne's journey of her life, yeah, it was rough at the end. It was rough. Nobody's going to deny that. But I think she did end well, as far as leaving a legacy for generations to come. She was proud of all the family reunions. She shared that. I remember looking at that book you brought in of your mother's and the pride that you took in putting that together. So it's representing Crosairs. It's lovely to meet people that I remember hearing about but never met. So my pleasure, my sincere pleasure, Lynn and Dave and Kathy and Joe, that your mother came to live with us. And I'm looking forward to next Sunday because we got a few extra surprises in store as well to celebrate Jeanne's life. Thank you.
Thank you all for your words. It's so neat to see all of these different aspects of Jeanne's life coming together through different people who knew her best at different points in different areas. All of these things coming together into a whole life. I hope that hearing these memories, giving voice to these memories, offers some comfort in the midst of loss and a reminder of the many gifts that Jeanne brought to this world, as well as a testimony to how her impact will continue to be felt in the lives that all of you live and the relationships that all of you continue to hold dear. Jeanne's daughter, Lynn, has put together a brief video tribute to Jeanne to honor her life and legacy. Thank you again for your presence today and your participation in this memorial service.
That's the time we'll leave at 7, and I'll be waiting up for heaven, walking every mile of railroad track that takes me back. I never thought my heart would be so yearning. Why did I decide to roll? Gonna make a sentimental journey. Sentimental journey home. Moon river, wider than mine. I'm crossing you in style someday. Oh, maker, you heartbreaker. Wherever you're going, I'm going your way. Two drifters off to see the world. There's such a lot of world to see. We'd rather the same rainbows end, waiting round the bend. My huckleberry
I hear you like the sound of music.
I do.
I do too. It's my favorite musical of all times. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, every morning you greet me, small and white, clean and bright. Look happy to meet me, and lots of snow may and grow, bloom and grow forever. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, that's my homeland forever. Clean and bright, look happy to meet me, and blossoms of snow may you bloom and grow. Bye, Grandma! Bloom and grow forever. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, that's my homeland forever.
If you haven't already done so on the way in, we invite you to please sign the memory book that is right outside of the chapel. There are also cards that give you the opportunity to share a memory. Now, peace be with all of you. I wish all of you comfort in the midst of loss and joy in both the memories of Jeanne's time with us and our ongoing bonds of friendship and family that we experience with one another. Thank you.